Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. And your dial's set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're here. And we're broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli, and although she doesn't want to say it publicly, this is KLID's Sonny Skidmore's favorite broadcast. Welcome, John Regan.
Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning. You know, I get calls from one of our affiliates, KLID. Sonny Skidmore runs the station there. Yeah, she's absolutely fabulous. She's been a broadcaster and she's been on television and over the years, and she'll call me, and every once in a while during the telephone call off the air, I'll say, "Oh, I'm really glad to be your favorite broadcaster with our instructors. Thank you so much." And she just will not admit it, but I believe that we are her favorite broadcast. John Regan, boy, you have so much on today's class schedule. It's literally, I can't get over it. I think this is either a record or darn close. Why don't I just sit back and enjoy the class?
I tell you, I'm glad it's slow before the holiday news period. Otherwise, we might need to preempt a few other shows just to get everything in.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly mention I do have the links, and this is on the news tab of the financial state of the union.com, or you can get there from my ministry website, Ezekiel 33, EZE33.org, EZE33.org. And at the top, you'll see the link for Hear the Watchman. It's coming to Dallas March 31st through April 2nd. It's, I tell you, the number of excellent speakers they have just continues to grow. They just recently added Chuck Norris's son, Mike Norris, to the lineup. So I'm looking forward to meeting him. And I believe everybody from Knoxville is going to be there. And it's going to be very informative, very interesting, and more importantly, we really need the people in the audience to get there and work together, because while I think we're going to have fewer policy fights with the new administration, it doesn't change the situation that he's inheriting. And if don't drive that home with some of today's information, it's just not pretty out there. I've also got the link up there, Watch Movies Online Without the Filth. This is VidAngel, VID Angel, and it's not a subscription service. Basically, the way it works in order to do this is you have to own the movie, so they sell it to you, you watch it, and then they'll buy it back, and if you do that within 24 hours, it just costs you $1 for standard definition. And if you do it through that link, and $5 if you do that before the 23rd, I get to watch some free movies next year. It's just a few bucks for me, but that will handle the FTC disclaimer. Oh, for our number one, the evil spirit of the season. This goes to Microsoft on their webpage, and the current top video they have there is Microsoft celebrates the spirit of the season. And if you watch that video, you won't find anything about Christmas or Jesus, not even Santa Claus. But you will find things about refugees and homosexuality and stuff of that nature. So if you think the reason of the season has something to do with Jesus, well, not according to Microsoft. And unfortunately, I think all the other tech companies are, at least the major ones, are pretty much aligned with them. It's kind of a repeat of Genesis 6, and I guess even going back to earlier than that, when there's a temptation, you will surely not die, and we have all these tech companies working very hard on making it to where you can upload your consciousness to the computer and live forever. No God necessary. And I just want to let you know that's not going to work out very well.
I'm looking at the image. I clicked your link, and it says Microsoft celebrates the spirit of the season. And this year has been challenging. This is a quote right from Microsoft's website. This year has been challenging for many of us, for many, and much of what we hear in the news can be negative. We wanted to lift people up and remind them that ordinary people can make a difference. Our message focuses on the spirit of the holidays, people coming together and celebrating what's good and right with the world, what unites us instead of what divides us. We hope you enjoy, end quote. And so there's a peace and love always, and there's the homo flag colors. There are people holding hands, different races and colors. But there's I don't see any crosses anywhere. I don't see one, unless it's buried somewhere in the message. I see this one person's hair. It looks like a bunch of snakes, literally. Everybody's the images, two main images are looking upward, sort of upward. But I don't see any Christmas message. And I kind of think that Christmas is the centerpiece of this particular season. There are more people who are focused on Christmas than anything else this season, but that's not what the message of Microsoft on this link shows. Am I missing something, John?
Not at all, and it's much like this year's Thanksgiving proclamation. And you won't find God mentioned, you won't find pray or prayer mentioned. And like I said, the reason Lord's in there is because of the way the date's styled in the year of the Lord. And he doesn't have to pretend anymore, because he's not up for re-election. And since Thanksgiving was after this year's election, he just went all out. And if you compare that to what other presidents have done, especially going back, in the earlier days in the country with, notables Washington and Lincoln, you just see how much even the churches have fallen from where we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were talking about churches over the weekend, my son and I, and there's a church in our neck of the woods that is focused on the village and Christ. And what they do is they have lots of events where they bring the village together, potluck dinners and meals and so forth. And it's just to keep the community aware of what's happening within the village, aware of what's happening within the village and so forth. So I think that's kind of a nice part of the fellowship of church.
Well, and speaking of falling from where they were, the second article, Why Sears is Toast. Somebody went to a Sears store in Richmond, Virginia. The photographs are from June. And we've talked about things since then, how suppliers have cut back and whatnot. And they've got a slideshow, 46 photographs just walking around the store. There's lots of empty floor space. The displays are not well kept. During the 45 minutes they were there doing this, they ran across 2 employees. Yeah. And it's I mean, I've seen thrift stores in better shape than this. It's absolutely pathetic.
My first corporate job during the high school years, I had an offer to work as a mechanic at Sears Automotive Department, and back then it was an honor. It was an honor to be a high school student and have a job working at Sears. They treated me very well. All the department managers helped all the other department managers. It was go team go. It was really, really nice. It was the era of good, better, best. The salespeople were knowledgeable. You even had career salespeople, people who had been working in that job at Sears, promoted up through the ranks. And Sears was, part of their family, the employees' family. It was really nice. And it wasn't like when we were selling things at Sears, we were selling inferior products. We were selling really good, top quality American-made products. And it was a wonderful experience. Today, I don't even want to go into Sears. As a former Sears employee, I still have my shirt that they gave me when I became a mechanic. They said blue jeans are fine, but we want you to wear this mechanic shirt. And it was a dark gray colored long sleeve shirt that didn't show the grease. And it was really kind of nice that they gave me that shirt. Still have it today. And this was from when I worked there in the 70s. It still fits. It's top quality then. It still works fine. And it's sad. It's sad how many missteps, how bad the management became. They were number one. You could buy anything at Sears. You could shop the Sears catalog and buy a house. Literally, you could buy a house kit. You could buy a heating system. You could buy an air conditioning system. I'm not talking about window units. I'm talking about a whole house system. Water softeners, car parts, tools, clothing, anything you can think of. It was available at Sears. They've lost their way. It's sad. I'm sorry to say that. Captain John Regan's with us, and we are at thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. We've clicked the news tab, and we're continuing on in class. John?
Spying on retail. There's all kinds of data we've received, and this one talks a bit about the satellite imagery, and it shows a sharp retail slowdown after the election. And there's a lot of information in the article. We really don't have time to get into all the detail. It's got a nice chart there for the last 3 elections, 2008, 2012, and 2018. And in the middle, there's a line that's showing Election Day. And they're using the spending on Election Day as the base point and showing you what sales were like for the 2 weeks prior and the 2 weeks after. And while there was a lot of optimism, for some people anyway, those that weren't grabbing their safety pins, if you look at the charts, there's not a whole lot of difference in the way that this year looks compared to the previous 2. In fact, you'll can see where in 2012, a little over a week before, sales were down, and in 2008, after Obama was first elected, and you get to about 10 days after the election, and sales really started slowing down. And what I found interesting in here, it gets into some bullet points, and the about the fourth bullet point down is about retail department store, and the average holiday traffic of 11 retailers moved from positive low single digits in 2014, flat in 2015, to negative mid-single digits in 2016. And they're saying that the fourth quarter this year to date started out negative 6% from November 1st through December 4th, and improving to just minus 3.2% the week of Black Friday. So it's, with all the optimism out there, it's still a down season for retail.
John, I've got a comment. Yesterday, I needed a thermostat for one of our trucks, and I didn't have that particular thermostat in inventory in our shop for repairs. And I want to change the 180-degree thermostat to 190 in one of our diesel trucks. So I went to a chain store, well-known chain store in the automotive parts business. And I had previously talked to the store manager, and I said, we do a lot of repairs here, and it'd be nice if we had a discount. And he offered me a commercial account, and there's a lot of hoops I had to jump through. So I said, I'll tell you what, you spend a lot here. We'll just give you 10% off on everything. So that's great. Great. And then I wanted to buy some shock absorbers, and 10%, was really not enough, because I could get them online for about half of the price that they would ask for these shock absorbers. And he said, I'll tell you what, we'll meet you in the middle. So we'll take the difference between the online price and our price, and we'll meet you right in the middle. And I said, well, that's great, which happens to be about 25% off. And they were willing to do it. And yesterday, when we needed this thermostat, I went into the store. The manager wasn't there. One of the guys was there. He said, sure, we'll do that. We'll meet you in the middle. So they know that the policy of that store, which is a national chain, they are willing to discount about 25%. So I just bring them the price. They believe me, and they drop their price about 25%. So what I'm saying to our class is, I'm not the only guy that can do that. I'm sure that you all can do that if you ask. And what that tells me is that the only reason the store is doing that is because they need the business. They need those sales. And they're willing to make less margin on them in order to have those sales, because the management and the employees are ranked on how well they sell. So they want to do well individually, and they're willing to take less from me in order to do it. And they can take less from you in order to do it as well. Keep that in mind, class, and just ask for that discount. We'll be right back. Captain John Reagan's with us. TheFinancialStateOfTheUnion.com. We're at the news tab. John, please continue.
We're up to propaganda priests. And now Catholic priests will have to preach about climate change as part of a drive by the church to cut global warming. And we've talked about various things over the last few years about this Marxist Pope. We had that one article where on a trip to South America, and the official was showing him, I think he actually presented Jesus instead of on a cross as a crucifix. Jesus attached to the hammer and sickle, and the Pope was all smiley about that. To me, I thought that was a bit of an outrage, but as time went on, the Pope called in people to find out about climate change, and the first one that he called in was one of the, dyed-in-the-wool leftists on climate change. And after that meeting, he canceled the meeting that was scheduled with the guy that would have told him the truth about climate change. And even more recently, we've talked about how the model that they used had mathematics that apply to electronics, and it doesn't scale to the atmosphere. It's just different mathematics. So that if you used real mathematics, real science, changing just that, and the model achieves all their goals. Of course, that doesn't achieve their goals of implementing this wonderful new world communist order that they want to do. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, I believe that climate change is real. I see it here at the farm. I see the trees are dying. I see the algae, the red algae. I see the green algae. I see the white mold, the black mold. I'm thankful that there is an increase in the awareness of climate change. And I look at what we do here at the farm, and I'm interested in reducing all the pollution that we can possibly reduce. But actually, I don't think we're in the pollution business compared to what would be considered a consumer. A consumer is probably more in the pollution business than anybody else because they just buy things. And I can't think of any manufacturing process that does not have some level of pollution in it. So I'm thankful that we are raising awareness about pollution. And John, I was traveling to Springfield, Missouri, and I was in a little bit of a traffic jam. There were, I think, 3 vehicles in front of us. And just having those vehicles in front of us, just the exhaust, you could absolutely smell the choking exhaust. And, I noticed that because I live in an area that does not have choking exhaust, for the most part. And I think if you live in a city, you're surrounded by choking exhaust, and maybe you just don't realize how bad the pollution is. So I am concerned about it at many, many levels. I guess that would be my comment.
Yeah, that's one of the levels. But to say that the climate problem is due to man-made carbon dioxide emissions just doesn't really stand up. And their models also ignore the sun. And
oh yeah, sun is a big factor, huge factor. Absolutely huge factor is the sun, no question.
And moving on along, State of the Consumer. This was released from Bureau of Labor Statistics, and this is for the year 2015. And I found it interesting. This list, if you get down to the table, average income before taxes for 2015, $69,629, and these you have to get into the government speak, which means you have to get into the glossary. These average expenditures are per consumer unit. That's just another way of saying household. So there's I had to go to the census website to look up little information. There's almost 117 million households with 2.64 people on average. And then most of the time when you see these numbers, they'll give you median numbers, which skews it a little bit too. This is taking everything and giving you the straight average. And boy, do I wish we had an average income of $69,000. And then you get down, has a nice breakdown of the expenses. I think it leaves a lot out and also probably underestimates you can compare to yours. And for fun, I looked up the housing, and especially if you're in a city, I think this is quite unrealistic. It's saying $10,742 for shelter. That's a little under $900 a month. And here in Dallas, a lot of places, it's hard to find a one-bedroom for under $900 a month. And if you do, it may not be a place you want to live. And you get to some of the sillier places like, New York and California and Chicago, and housing is even more outrageous there. But these are the published national averages, and I did do one calculation. I multiplied the average income before taxes with the number of households and came up with a number of $8.1 trillion, which is pretty much in line with what I would expect income to be from wages and salaries. There's still things like business income, investment income, retirement income that may not be included in that if you wanted to look at what the total income for the country is. And I'll pause if you want to comment, otherwise we'll be going on to talk about the Long Sunday.
I'm looking at this at the numbers, and it's annual average expenditures that I'm looking at, and food. This caught my attention, John. Food at home, okay, 2015, $4,000. Food away from home, $3,000. So total food would be $7,000. I'm really surprised at what people spend on average away from home. 3/7 of their food expenditures are spent away from home. That seems like an enormous percentage. It seems like people are eating out a lot more than I thought they were. And if you looked at my numbers, it would probably be whatever the home expenditure is and $500 away from home, not $3,000. Would your numbers be similar to that? A small percentage away from home compared to home?
It would be, but if you work at a corporate job these days, a lot of times you will eat out for lunch because, one, they don't give you enough space to really bring your lunch. And two, if you do, you may not have your lunch because some people will see something in the fridge they like and just take it. It's
or you may be ostracized for eating at your desk or eating on the park bench or something, depending on where you work. But I was just kind of surprised.
That's a good part of it there.
Okay.
The next link is a PDF. It's a small book called The Long Sunday, written by Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. He's the executive director of the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security. He was part of the EMP Commission that we've talked about, their report. And it's a 64-page PDF, good information. He was on Hagman and Hagman Friday night for hours 2 and 3, if you want to listen into that. And the only thing that I really would say is different from what he presents is going back to the EMP Commission. They say that there'd be a 90% fatality rate in America within the first year. And as I've talked about here, running the numbers on the food supply, I believe the fatality rate is going to be at least 99.5%. And it won't take a year. It'll probably just take about 60 days. So if you believe that a grid down is coming, it would greatly behoove you to be in a position to have at least 3 years of food on hand if you're not already producing most or all of your own food. And even that might be on the optimistic side, especially if we end up having limited nuclear exchange, you may need closer to a 9-year supply of food just to make it through.
And I can tell you that, unless it's freeze-dried food or MREs, that 9 years of shelf life is pretty darn hard to achieve for enough food to last a family. To store 9 years worth of food is tough. Is really, really tough. Now, of course, you don't have to store all of it for 9 years because you'll eat half of it within 4.5 years. But I can't, John, I don't know anybody who has 9 years worth of food. Not one person. Not one person. Do you?
I'm not even close.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you know anybody?
No.
No. So what you're going to have to do is grow it. And I think you ought to consider growing garlic. Captain John Regan's with us, the financialstateoftheunion.com. John, what's next?
I think what I'm going to do is save the next two financial ones for after the news break and see if we can get the last two for hour one, even before the national security state and communism 2030 finish this hour. Before the national security state, before World War II, it's amazing some of the technology, and this goes back to the days of Tesla and Royal Raymond Rife. And this link will take you to a page at rents.com. He's been having interviews with Bill Tompkins, and Bill used to work for Douglas Aircraft, which that was a long time ago. Bill's in his 90s and became part of McDonnell Douglas and, a good part of the military and industrial complex. And in that link, you'll find links for PDFs that discuss technology, including very exotic propulsion systems. And you just wonder, what do they have now? Given that this was like 60 years ago. And then there's links to 6 hours of interviews that Jeff Francis made available to the public. So if you're into that type of thing, very interesting stuff. And Communism 2030, got a quote here from a member of parliament in Denmark. Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. And, she looks like a useful idiot. The 2030.
Dressed like a peasant. She's dressed like a peasant.
And the way the article starts out, welcome to year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say, our city. I don't own anything. Right. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. Well, what I would recommend, if you've not read the Communist Manifesto, you can find it online for free. And I know it's not an easy read, but if you at least read through where they have the 10 planks for converting a Western country to communism, at least read that for you. You'll get enough of the gist that what communism is slavery. You own nothing at all. Everything belongs to the state. Of course, who's the state but the elite? But, whereas, back in the time in the 1800s, there was slavery and also a lot of abuses in the private sector. This basically, talks bad about private slavery, but what it does is it corporatizes it into the hands of the state, which is exactly what all this 2030 agenda coming out of the UN is. I guess the good news is hopefully we'll have the collapse in worldwide EMP and avoid this nonsense.
I think about I think about not owning anything. It's so foreign to me. I remember back in the 60s when my parents had this phone on the wall. It was a rotary dial phone, and it was rented from the Bell telephone system for $1, I think it was $1.17 or $1.07 per month. That was added to the phone bill. And I said to my parents, why are we doing this? Why don't we just buy a phone and own it? And we were conned into thinking that you really had, if you wanted reliability, you had to have one of their phones, one of the Bell system phones manufactured by Western Electric. And that was not the case. I mean, yeah, they were absolutely durable, and they were the most durable phones ever built. But you could own your own phone for, let's say, $20 or $10, and the break-even point was either 10 or 20 months. And that's what my parents did. They bought their own phone, and we no longer paid rent on that wall-hanging phone. But it's so foreign to me, John Regan, to not own anything. And if you don't own anything, why would you take care of it? It's not yours, so who cares, right? That's the problem. The problem is we need to own things so that we take care of them and take better care of our planet. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Captain John Regan's with us. John, you were talking about new propulsion systems, and I remember back in probably the very, very late 1960s, I was in a science fair, and I built an ion rocket. No moving parts, and it had ion propulsion, and literally would move, not lift off, but if you suspended this rocket on a string, it would move the rocket forward on the string. So it didn't have a lot of force, but it worked. And that was in the very, very, very late 1960s. So I'm sure we've come a lot farther since then. And that's just me as a child doing this. So I found what you said previous hour quite fascinating. What's on for this hour, John?
Well, the two articles we didn't get to from hour one, will the financial system make it through 2017, and the other crack up? There's so many balls in the air, to use a juggling term, that we don't know which one is going to cause the problem. There's so many choices, and these show a couple of ways. The first one is from King World News. A former Soros associate just warned 1,000 layman's event is going to plunge the world into total chaos. And he's talking about what's going on in Europe, the problems with the banks, the problems with debt, the destruction of the euro. And we've talked before, is when the euro goes, you expect the dollar to go within a week or two later. So it's big. We just had the referendum in Italy. Italian banks have big problems. They have 400 billion euros of non-performing loans. We've got Dutch bank with over $45 trillion. We can't even imagine numbers this big in derivatives. And here in the U.S., J.P. Morgan has even more than Dutch Bank in derivatives exposure. And just to jog your memory a little bit, there's different types of derivatives, and about $500 billion worth, that'd be $500 trillion worth of derivatives, are pegged to interest rates. And what's been happening lately, interest rates have been going up. And when they reach certain levels, and this depended on the individual contracts, those derivatives start popping. But that's not everything. We've got, on this side of the pond, problems with U.S. treasuries. We've got foreign governments dumping treasuries. Foreign central banks liquidated $375 billion in U.S. government debt in the last 12 months. Like I've talked about, it's not just the shortfall that we have, which looks that it could exceed $2 trillion for fiscal year 2017. There's trillions of dollars on top of that, probably I'd say at least $3, $4, $5 trillion that they have to turn over because they're financed with all this short-term debt. And if this debt market freezes up and the Treasury has an auction sale for its debt and nobody shows up, the government's got big problems at that point, and a lot of things come to a roaring halt. And it's not that we don't know what is coming. The bigger question is that people have is when, and that's the one that we really can't answer too well. There's a lot of indications that this could happen in 2017. There's been a lot of charts that we've talked about showing that we're in as bad or worse situation than 2008, and even the Great Depression. But since the world's on this fiat currency system, they're able to do some funky things that allow them to kick the can down the road a little bit more. We've seen that with quantitative easing. We've seen that with zero and negative interest rates. And if you see them do another round of quantitative easing, it's not going to do a whole lot, but it might buy a few months. The other rabbit that looks like they're trying to pull out of their hat, another critter that I never saw in all my business school education, is universal basic income. And that might buy another few months, but sooner or later, they're going to be out of rabbits. And I don't think it could really go beyond 2018. I'm really, really concerned about 2017. And of course, there's other things besides financial that can go wrong with, virtually all the countries in the world being at war. I think the articles that we discussed said there were 5 countries not at war. And then we also have the sun that can do funky things like the Carrington event all over again. So at least we live in interesting times. Vincent?
Well, I'm seeing smaller expenditures. I'm seeing, and you're going to be talking about this this hour, used cars and cash for clunkers, the all over again. And so I'll wait till you get to that point to make a comment.
Okay, and why don't we go ahead and come down to the $1 billion problem for Dallas and the miracle needed. And we've been talking about the Dallas Police and Firemen Pension Fund. It's a $1 billion problem, and it's like we've talked about with pension funds. The choices are you either cut the pensions or you have to raise taxes. In the case of public funds such as this, and it's a huge, huge problem. And in fact, the only city in worse shape than Dallas at this point is Chicago, if that tells you how bad the situation in Dallas is. And the miracle, it's a former Fed advisor, some miracle needed to defuse the $1.3 trillion pension time bomb. And that's just the public pensions. There's also the private pensions. And what happened there, unions negotiated a lot of this back in the 60s and 70s, and it was great for keeping people loyal to the union, but they didn't have to deliver. And what they would do is typically all the companies in industry, you might have 4 or 5 of these companies, they would have one pension fund, and it was set up so that if one of the companies ended up going out of business, that the remaining companies would take care of this fund. And as time's gone by, some of these were down to 1 or 2 companies left holding the basket for these funds. And they don't have the option of raising taxes that governments do. So what's going on the private side of things is probably going to get even more interesting. So,
and how many people are dependent on those pensions, and how dependent now, and how many people are looking forward to the benefits from those pensions in the very near future? That's a huge concern.
And also, like I've talked about Social Security and Medicare, while the bigger part of that problem doesn't happen until later on, all the models that they have do not include the millions of jobs that we're getting ready to lose over the next 5 or 10 years to automation and artificial intelligence. And when that income is taken out of those models, Social Security and Medicare become even worse than the $200 trillion problem it is now. But it's the immediate, debt, pension, derivatives, banking problem, and odds are it's going to be one of those that causes the problem. It could be something else, and in retrospect, whatever it is, it'll make sense. The only thing you can do is be as prepared as you can for it, and it's going to be one for the record books. We've never been in this position in all of human history.
You mean we've never had the lies so grand and the belief in the lies so grand that the lies can actually take us down?
Well, you have to include in that category the lies about money. We're not using real money. The lies that debt doesn't matter. You can have as much debt as you want.
Right.
So, yeah. And, of course, with the dinosaur media out there, even the people that do try to get some information from news aren't getting the information that they need. And that's why the new media is under such attack. Because if it gets out what the real situation is, the politicians and their enablers are going to have problems from the rioting peasants.
Yeah, and we outnumber those guys. And it's going to be a huge problem because, as the Japanese said just prior to attacking us, that the problem is all the Americans with guns behind every blade of grass, behind every tree. This section, Hour 2, Captain John Reagan is going to continue.
Let's go ahead and back up to the China anti-satellite weapons. And this takes me back to the good old days when I was captain in the basement of the Pentagon working on the nuclear planning system. And, when I started that assignment, I was still planning on an Air Force career. And I had, was taking my MBA at the time and also the Air Command and Staff College. And when you take Air Command and Staff College, part of it is an elective, and you have an option of, from I think it was about 5 or 6 choices. And I took what was known at the time as Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative. And what was interesting on that for me is I had just come from Germany, where I spent 3 years there, and during that time had an opportunity to visit some of the remnants of the Maginot Line, which France built to keep an invading German army out. This was done after World War I. And that was quite impressive. But the thing is, with technology, it's more than just the ground troops and tanks that we had in World War I. By the time we got to World War II, you had aircraft, and that kind of made a wall obsolete. And when you look at the SDI project, which was to protect the United States from a nuclear missile attack, that would have put some exotic weapons in space to knock out those weapons that were on the way to us. And one of the points of my education was that if you were advanced enough technologically to be in that position to attack the United States, you would also have the technology to attack, the technology of the Star Wars project. And this is an extension of that. The China, and in fact, I've already tested one of these before. They will make it to where they can destroy satellites, they can grab onto satellites, and we are so dependent on satellites, not just for our military needs, but for communications, for weather. It's just become such a part of life now. And this is, to me, really one of those things that raises a flag for concern. Because if we go to war, the first thing that China would want to do is destroy our spy satellites there, make us blind, have our communication satellites down, make it difficult to communicate. Like I say, we live in interesting times.
John, how many people have maps in their vehicles now? I remember traveling through Kentucky and Indiana and Iowa and Pennsylvania. You could stop at the travel centers, and they would give you free maps, of their state. So stop in the Pennsylvania one, and they'd have a whole bunch of maps. And if you wanted 3, no problem, take 3. And I used to get one for each vehicle, so we had maps in every vehicle, and we still do. But the point is, how many people have maps in their vehicles and would know how to get from here to there using a map today? Because we rely on our smartphones, right? We rely on, it's on the phone. GPS will tell you how to get there. Type in the address, starting point, or forget that. We know where we are because the phone knows where we are. So how do we get from where we are right now to where we want to go? Just type it in, and the route is presented on the phone, turn by turn. Well, how much have we lost not knowing how to read maps? Do the millennium generation, do the snowflakes know how to read a map? I hope so, but I doubt it.
They got the computer to tell them what to do. And remember that GPS are satellites too.
Yeah, and that was the point. So what happens if those satellites are taken down? How do the trucks get to where they're going? How do the truck drivers know, the new truck drivers, how do they know where their destination is if they don't have GPS? If they don't have that TomTom or Garmin unit or smartphone, how are they going to know how to get there? Captain John Regan's with us. John, we've got Kyle in Montana. Welcome, Kyle. Kyle, you're on the air with Captain John Regan. Welcome.
Yeah. I just had an experience about 1.5 years ago that really, your GPS thing really reminded me of it. A friend of mine who's pretty well off flew for his son's birthday, flew me back east, him and me and my son, to go charter fishing with him. And we were in Boston. And when I was noticing, my friend was just watching his phone constantly to find out where to go. And I'm talking, last-minute decisions, last-second decisions to be able to know you come up over these hills, and there'd be 3 different paths you had to take, and you had to get in one of them lanes in a matter of a second. And So anyway, he was finding his way all around Boston and Washington, D.C. and stuff like that. And I just noticed that everybody that I saw had these like tablets mounted on their dash. And those were all GPS units to be able to find their way around the town. And so to put a exclamation point on this thing, when I was flying out, there was cops at the airport there, and so one of them was just kind of parked right up there, and I was sitting outside, so I didn't have to sit in the terminal. And I just walked over and started talking to this guy, and I noticed he had one of those things on his dash, and it wasn't. He had two of them actually. One was for whatever came across his, for business to take care of, and the other one was a GPS unit. And so anyway, I asked him. I said, well, you've been here long? And he says, yeah, I grew up here in Boston. And I said, I don't imagine you need that GPS unit. He says, I use it every time I leave. He said, otherwise I get lost. And he was probably mid-50s. Mm-hmm. And he did not know his way around the city enough that because he said there's just too many off streets and too many different one-way places. And anyway, I thought, here you're been there for 50 whatever years, and he was using one. He says we couldn't find half of these places if we didn't have this.
Yeah, Mike Parsons called in and talked about how he was flying with a guy who, was a military pilot and had trouble finding his way around, without assistance from electronics. Yep. You're absolutely right. It's a real problem. We have become dependent. We don't know how to spell anymore because, of the early days of Bill Gates and Microsoft's word processing software that would correct our spelling on the fly. We don't know how to add or subtract or multiply or divide or estimate because of the calculator, the electronic calculator, which has been around, since the early 70s, maybe even the late 60s. And of course, we don't know how to find our way because of the electronics we have in our cars and phones. You're absolutely right. No question about it. It's a real problem. Pretty soon we won't have to know how to think.
I think that is the whole entire agenda. I mean, I really seriously think that is the agenda, Vince, because if you had to use a map, and the more dumbed down, I think that's really part of the entire agenda. The more you don't think, the easier it gets to not think.
And
I'll tell you what would be
worse than that. If we look down, the never forget a face. It talks about using facial recognition to bring up information about the person. And they really want to get this combined with augmented reality so that when you're looking at a person, you've got their name and other information about them. So imagine in your normal working environment, you won't even remember people's names unless you have your augmented reality.
Such a good point, John Regan. So we're at an event. Let's say it's a party and a whole bunch of people are invited, like our house. So when we have an expo kind of thing and we've got John Statmiller and John Regan, we got a whole bunch of people here, and we all bring out our phones, right? And we aim them at each other and go, I know you. You're John Regan.
There's just some realities, Vince, that you just almost can't imagine. And one of them is anything happening at your house like that or at my house, either one.
Yeah, I can assure you it does not happen. And we don't even have to have a sign anymore because people leave their phones at home and in their vehicles because they know they're not welcome in our house. But Kyle, I'm really glad you brought that up. We are so dependent on electronics, and it bothers me. It really does bother me. Now, one part of electronics I really like, and that is eBay and Craigslist, and I like being able to find things before I go shopping for them. I like being able to find good deals. John Statmiller says I'm cheap. And, I keep reminding him that's really not true. I'm not cheap. I'm thrifty. I don't like wasting money. It's a sin in my world to waste anything, including money.
Yep.
It's a sin to throw things out.
Yep, I am the same way, Vince. I make wink and squeal. I pinch those pennies so hard because, you know, people have gotten into the mentality that, you know, that money is it just fritters away, because if somebody is not hurting for money, then you don't really think about it. But if people have ever had a hard life where you literally were down to almost nothing, you learn from those things, like our grandparents did in the Depression, and it carried over into my dad and mom. They were thrifty. I mean, they didn't throw nothing away, and it's a lot in our lives as well. You know, it's just. But the further we get away from that, and the more we get into this lackadaisical type of thinking, the more people look on people like you and I as cheap or however you want to put it. But they'll put a derogatory term to it. But it isn't being cheap. It's just understanding that you have limited resources, and those limited resources have to go for the things that are the most important to take care of in order of priority.
Let me give you an example. Go ahead, John.
The next to last article will soon see how stupid millennials are. Starbucks plans to open 12,000 new stores in the next 5 years, including 7,500 upscale cafes where a cup of coffee costs $10.
You know, if I were on the board of directors, of course I never would be because I don't understand the current mindset. But if I were on the board of directors, I'd say you guys have lost your minds. There's no way that anyone's going to buy a cup of coffee for $10. It won't happen, you know. And I'm sure I'd be 100% wrong. I'm sure there are plenty of stupid people who would do that. Yep. And I'm sure I'll bet you. I'm not a betting man, but I'll bet you that neither John Regan nor Kyle from Montana do not frequent Starbucks.
I literally have, as far as I know, Vince, I have never been to a Starbucks, and the only coffees that I get from any of those places is if I'm with somebody and they say, "Hey, you want a cup of coffee?" and they want to buy it, because I'm not spending no $4 or $5 for a cup of coffee. Even to me, that's insane.
John Regan?
Once a year they offer a free cup of coffee, and I did try it out, and I don't really care for their coffee.
Okay. And in my case, I went to a meetup years ago, and I walked in the door, and a guy who was one of the regulars at the meetup handed me a cup of Starbucks coffee. And he said, "Now you can't say you haven't had a cup of Starbucks coffee." He literally went out of his way to buy one, and I've got to tell you that it was nothing special. Absolutely, you know, nice thought on his part, but it was not something. I've never gone to Starbucks myself, and even after having tried it, I still haven't gone to Starbucks. But I know people who it's like a church to them. They are religious about Starbucks coffee. I don't get it. It's still in a paper cup, isn't it?
Oh, it's unbelievable, Vince. I come up with a poor man's latte, and I like, so I'll take a little stevia and about 1.5 inches of milk in my coffee cup, and then I put a little bit of imitation almond flavoring in there, just about 1/4 of a capful, and then I'll pour the coffee on that and then stir it up, and I really like that. But I'm not paying $4 or $5 for it. I might have, 10 cents in it if I'm lucky.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll let John get on with this thing. I'm sorry I took up quite so much time, but
thanks for calling, Kyle. That's Kyle from Montana, USA Preparedness instructor. John Regan, back to you.
Let's hit the bottom of the list, talent perspective. I threw this in for those of you that read your Bible, which I highly recommend. And if you need some help with that, there's an app for your phone that Benham Brothers puts out. And you can actually have it read to you, and that's what we do. And I've been learning all kinds of fun stuff. I've been using that app since May. This talks about an event that happened in 524 BC when pirates robbed a Greek island, and they got 100 talents of gold, which we don't really understand that because we don't use that weight anymore. So in the ancient world, a talent was equivalent to 26 kilograms, or about 836 troy ounces. So the 100 talents of gold that was pirated, it would be worth just shy of $100 million today. So when you read about a talent of gold in the Bible, that would be roughly $1 million. So it's quite a significant amount.
And the main thrust of describing this, John, is what? That we still use gold?
It's been used forever, and this just helps you put the story in perspective so you understand the magnitude of it.
Very good. We'll be right back. Final segment coming up. Captain John Regan. Captain John Regan's with us. We're at the financialstateoftheunion.com, the news tab. John, last segment.
When I started the process, I had 80 articles in my show folder. I had that cut down to just under 60, and we're able to cover less than 20 of those on air today. So I highly recommend you get to the site and check out the rest of the news. To finish out, let's look. I've got a couple of tech articles, Virtual Fence and Bluetooth 5. Virtual Fence talks about a system that's been in testing for the last couple of years. It's kind of like shock collars for goats, so you can keep them in a certain area of the pasture. And in addition to that, you can track the goats, and it can also inform the farmer if the goat's sick or the animal's stuck or managed to lose its collar. So you don't have to wait for going out in the field to see if there's an issue. And just wait till they give you a shock collar for humans. Bluetooth 5. It's you think, what's the big deal? Everybody's been using Bluetooth. Well, this next version, as opposed to Bluetooth 4, it offers more range. It's got doubled data transfer speed, quadrupled network range, 8 times the broadcast message capability over Bluetooth 4 devices. And why this is a big deal, this is what they're going to put in for all those wonderful Internet of Everything devices. And this is how it will communicate locally. It'll probably either be connected to your router or the smart meter in your home for talking with the controllers at corporate and government locations. So just wanted to let you know what's coming and what it's going to be used for. Vincent?
So Bluetooth 5, 4 times the range, twice the speed, and they say with no increase in power consumption. I'm just trying to figure out how they do that. I don't understand the physics of how you can have farther range unless you change the frequency. But we're going to need to look into that and learn more about that. But they say 4 times the range and double the speed. I'm going to talk to Bert Bertonis. He's our radio frequency engineer. Ask him how Bluetooth 5 accomplishes that without increasing the radiated power. I'd like to know how that's accomplished. John, what's next?
And they say it's going to be available in the next 2 to 6 months. And the the one other one didn't get to an hour two. A second one, negative growth. This one talks about what's happening with the Texas economy. Sales tax collections are down 5% year to date versus 2015, and down marginally from 2014, which marks the first time that it's been down 2 years periods since the financial crisis. And this is a big deal for Texas because Texas doesn't have income tax. It has property tax, which is, well, a lot of that goes to funding schools. A lot of income for cities comes from the sales tax. So for that to be down is a big deal. And in addition to that, it talks about the economy of Houston and Houston real estate, commercial and residential buildings. All of that's down. There's some really hard-hit areas. So if you think things are great in the great state of Texas, there's pockets like Dallas, but other parts of the state, not so much.
Yeah, I met a gal yesterday, and we were talking in the parking lot. $200 to change the oil in a Mercedes. $500 to change the spark plugs in a Mercedes at the dealership. It's crazy. So not everybody can afford this. And the next question is, when you look at used car prices, John, they're coming down because of cars coming off lease. John, thanks so much for being with us.